Koro, or genital retraction syndrome, is a cultural specific delusion in which an individual believes that their genitals are retracting into their body, as if it's shrinking or vanishing, and that will eventually kill them. Historically, men have even clamped devices or ropes onto themselves to pull their organs outwards. Koro has been described for centuries and often occurs in epidemic form, as outbreaks of mass hysteria have been recorded where dozens or hundreds of people in a community simultaneously believe their genitals are shrinking. Jerusalem Syndrome is a rare psychotic episode triggered by visiting the holy city of Jerusalem. Tourists, often with no previous mental illness, suddenly believe that they're a biblical figure or on a divine mission. They might dress in hotel bed sheets, preach out of their window, or try to encourage people to a hymn sing-along with them. Shockingly, roughly 50 tourists a year are treated for this. The syndrome isn't tied to one faith either, as Christian, Jewish, and non-religious visitors have experienced it. Walking corpse syndrome, or Cotard's delusion, is the eerie belief that you're dead. Some patients think they've died and are a walking corpse, while others believe that parts of their body, like their brain or blood, have vanished. One famous case involved a man named Graham who thought he had destroyed his brain. He spent his time in graveyards to surround himself with the fellow dead, and also believed that he didn't need to sleep or eat. His brain scans later showed activity levels that were close to that of someone in a coma, almost like his brain believed it too. Limb ownership delusion, or somatoparaphrenia, is when you believe that one of your limbs doesn't belong to you. A person might point to their clearly attached left arm and insist, "Hey guys, look! Someone's sewn their arm onto me!" The brain often becomes unable to sense or even move the limb, eventually leading to patients often trying to look for ways to remove their own limb. One woman, after a stroke, repeatedly tried to toss her left leg out of a wheelchair, claiming it was a dead stranger's leg, even asking the doctors to take her back into surgery and to finish their job by removing the foreign body part. Alien hand syndrome, or Dr. Strangelove syndrome, is when a person's hand starts moving on its own without their control. The hand might unbutton their shirt, slap faces, or grab objects entirely against their will, often while the person watches on in horror. They can feel it move and still feel pain, but have no control over its actions. Duplicate places delusion, or reduplicative paramnesia, is the strange delusion that a location exists in two or more places at once. In other words, a patient might insist that the office room that they're in is actually a precise duplicate of a room in another country entirely. A classic example involves a man hospitalized in Boston. He did acknowledge that it looked like Boston Veterans Hospital, yet claimed an identical hospital already existed in Taunton, even later going on to suggest that the hospital was entirely located in the spare bedroom of his house, and was confused why his family wouldn't just wait for him in his lounge downstairs. Clinical lycanthropy, or werewolf delusion, is when a person believes that they are transforming or that they've already transformed into an animal. The name comes from the werewolf legend, with lycanthropy traditionally referring to a wolf transformation, though it can mean other animals, as in practice, patients might think that they're turning into a wolf, snake, bird, tiger, dolphin, or virtually any animal that exists. Patients often mimic the habits of the animals that they're turning into, such as biting, crawling on all fours, or growling. They may even believe that they have physically changed, such as growing fur, claws, or a tail that doesn't exist. Interestingly, the disorder and which animal a person turns into is impacted by culture, so if they grow up in Europe, where tales of werewolves are rampant, they'll get that version of the disorder. But if someone grew up in another culture with different stories of people transforming into animals, they may believe they're going to turn into a tiger or even an insect. And on top of this, brain scans of the patients show real changes in sensory processing, even though no physical transformation is taking place, almost as if their brain is turning into that of the creatures. Delusional paratosis, or Ekbom Syndrome, is the unshakable belief that insects or parasites are crawling under your skin, even though there's no evidence of infestation. People feel itchy, bitten, or invaded with creatures living inside of them, and might scratch themselves raw trying to get the bugs out. It most commonly affects middle-aged or older individuals, with women outnumbering men about 2 to 1. Ugh, we really can't catch a break. Am I right, ladies? Glass delusion comes from medieval Europe in the 15th and 17th centuries. where people, often of a high social status like nobles, feared that they were made of glass. They believed they were fragile, see-through, and liable to shatter at any moment, with sufferers going to great lengths to avoid breaking, as some wouldn't sit down for fears that their buttocks would crack, and others wore reinforced clothes. King Charles VI of France, for example, refused to let anyone touch him, wearing padded clothes at all times to prevent cracking. Others believed that they'd swallowed glass objects, like Princess Alexandra of Bavaria, who thought that she ate an entire glass grand piano as a child that had remained inside her. She would walk carefully everywhere to avoid the piano shattering into pieces internally. Wendigo Psychosis, or cannibalistic delusion, is the belief that you're turning into, or already are, a Wendigo, a monstrous flesh-eating creature from Algonquin folklore. Sufferers feel an uncontrollable urge to eat human flesh. Historically, it appeared during harsh winters in isolated indigenous communities facing starvation. From a cultural perspective, the Wendigo legend was told as a warning against cannibalism during times when food was low, but obviously that might have backfired. As the delusion stems from culture and lack of education, it is almost entirely extinct now. The delusion of pregnancy causes people, surprisingly not just women, to believe that they're pregnant when they're not. In some cases, the body even mimics pregnancy with a stop in menstruation, bloating, or even lactation due to sheer belief. In others, the pregnancy is entirely imaginary with no physical signs, sometimes lasting over a year. Historical cases include Queen Mary I of England, who joyfully and publicly claimed that she was pregnant on 2 separate occasions that both ended up being false pregnancies. It often appears in people who are terrified of never being able to conceive, or at the opposite end, terrified of pregnancy. Sentient Objects delusion, or syndrome of delusional companions, is when people believe inanimate objects like dolls, toys, statues, or even appliances are alive and sentient. It's not just a quirky fun attachment either. They're convinced that these items have thoughts, feelings, and personalities. For example, someone might believe their childhood teddy bear is the love of their life, or another may see their fridge as an angry personal trainer who's constantly disappointed in their choice of diet. Totally not my fridge though. One reported case described an elderly woman who lived alone. She came to believe that the mannequins in store windows were actually alive and would hop from window to window on her way home in order to keep her company. Neurologically, it's not well studied, but it may relate to a mix of loneliness and the brain trying to find companionship when there is none. Okay then, that's all. Thank you, bye.